Hello, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Another tragic night. A combined attack on the Ukrainian capital with Kinzhal, missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones. At the same time, the Russian army is attacking other Ukrainian regions. The long-suffering Kyiv is also under missile and drone attacks. Missiles and drones are targeting other cities and towns in Ukraine, peaceful cities. Dozens injured, fatalities. Children being pulled from the rubble of residential buildings. All these are the results of yet another crime by the Russian Federation, just a few days after the so-called Easter truce declared by President Putin. And against this backdrop, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, talks about having a deal with Russia, and that it turns out to be harder to negotiate with Ukraine. I would like to see this deal that supposedly, even if only in his own fantasies, the President of the United States has reached. What is it about? About these missile strikes, about the terrorizing of the civilian population, about Russia's readiness to continue destroying Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. However, we can now state that the situation is developing according to Putin's scenario. The American president talks about negotiating with him for a ceasefire, and now does not even rule out recognizing the occupied Ukrainian territories as parts of Russia. The special representative of the American president arrives in Russia to once again talk with Putin and then publicly agree with all this public nonsense that is known from the Russian president, even without his confidential conversations with Steve Wyckoff. In reality, Putin's idea is quite simple. He wants to make Donald Trump an accomplice in his crimes. I have had to explain this repeatedly after each such criminal attack by Russia. Putin is indeed interested in negotiations with Trump, but not in ending the war. He is interested in prolonging these negotiations as long as possible and in continuing his crimes for as long as possible, so that Donald Trump's hands would be as stained with the blood of peaceful Ukrainians as the hands of the Russian president, so that Trump and Putin would become accomplices in Russia's crimes against Ukraine. And the more Donald Trump tells the American media all this nonsense about having reached an agreement with Putin, the more serious Russia's attacks on Ukrainian cities will become. Trump obviously does not even understand that each of his statements about agreements with Putin, about the possibility of reaching an understanding with Russia regarding a ceasefire, etc., is a death sentence for a specific Ukrainian citizen who might be killed in their own bed. And yes, the American president's and his entourage's lack of understanding of the political and economic realities in the world leads to such disastrous consequences. This needs to be explained. One cannot pretend that Donald Trump's actions related to the dialogue with the Russian authoritarian, to whom the American president has always shown an utterly inexplicable sympathy in the democratic world, lead to severe consequences for ordinary Ukrainian citizens. And when Donald Trump says that he primarily wants to stop the killings on Ukrainian soil, one could give him some advice. Firstly, talk less and realize that the position of the President of the United States is not a repulsive show, which we have been observing in the Oval Office for several months. And secondly, not to conduct negotiations when they make no sense, to realize that the diplomatic isolation of the Russian dictator frightens Putin much more than the constant attempts by Steve Witkoff and other representatives of the American political leadership to convince Putin that peace is better than war. No, in regimes like Putin's, war is much better than peace because it allows them to maintain power. It allows them to reformat their own society into one that will agree with internal totalitarianism and repression for the sake of seizing foreign territories. Ultimately, it allows them to reformat the world itself. After all, we see how under the influence of the Russian-Ukrainian war, supporters of ultra-right or neo-fascist views are becoming more and more influential in this very democratic world. They win presidential elections, are not ashamed to express their crazy views, which just yesterday seemed like echoes of Hitlerism, right, from the broadcasts of leading television channels in North America and Europe. So why does Putin need to negotiate peace with Trump when, through his own behavior and statements, the American leader encourages the Russian to carry out such attacks, of which we have all become witnesses today? And only a clear understanding of this situation, only an honest assessment of the dangerous political course of Trump, which is not only perilous for Ukraine, but for the entire civilized world, including the United States, towards rapprochement with the repugnant authoritarian regimes of this world, will allow us to stop those attacks in which each of us could become a victim of Putin's crime and Trump's absurdity. Yes, today it is such a duet, and the results of the activities of this dangerous duet we heard today in the explosions in Kyiv, Kharkiv, and other Ukrainian cities. So I want to express my sincere condolences to the relatives of those who died during yet another, as we understand, not the first and not the last, Russian mass attack against Ukraine. And I want to wish all of us common sense and an understanding of the consequences of this policy which we have witnessed after the pseudo-negotiation process began between the Oval Office and the Kremlin. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it. Use the opportunities to sponsor and support this channel. I wish you all the best on this challenging autumn morning. Victory and peace to you. Good luck.